up next, I'm really excited to introduce our next panel. It's a big one, full of the Women Who Code executive team and a board member. So I would like to invite Samaria Rooks to join me on stage. She is our Chief People and Inclusion Officer, and she will be leading this panel. Hi, Samaria.
Hello. Hi. Thank you, Shauna. Hello, everyone out there. Happy Connect. This is my first time getting to speak with everyone today, so we are just super excited to be here with you today. We are going to have a panel titled Designing for Inclusion, Women Who Code's Journey as an Advocate Brand. So I would like to invite our panelists up with me today. We will kick it off right to Alaina. I will let Alaina introduce herself again, a familiar face.
Hi, I'm Alaina Percival, CEO and co-founder of Women Who Code, and I am thrilled and honored to be here with you, Samaria, and the rest of the team, and I can't wait to have this conversation.
Awesome. Joey, are you there?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me as part of this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm Joey Rosenberg, President, Product and Communications here at Women Who Code.
Great. And Kim?
Hello, happy Connect, excited to be here. First time saying hello to everyone this year. I'm Kimberly Bennett, Chief Legal Officer and Brand Strategist here at Women Who Code.
Awesome, and I think Candice is here. Hi, Candice.
Hi, I am here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited and honored to be with this amazing group. I'm Candice Morgan. I am the head of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at GV. I'm a partner. GV is also known as Google Ventures, and have been a Women of Code board member for several years now.
Awesome. So excited to speak with this panel today. Again, my name is Samaria Rooks. I am the Chief People and Inclusion Officer here. I think out of this group, I was the last person to join the team. So I am going to lead this conversation with the purpose of us exploring Women Who Code's journey to build its advocate brand and how brands can show up as advocates and allies. So we just want this to be a natural conversation with our panelists. And I want to start it off by asking Alaina, today we announced Women Who Code's new mission, vision, and values, along with the new look and feel for Women Who Code. Tell us a little bit about the journey of shifting to be an advocate brand.
Yeah. So Women Who Code is celebrating 10 years. And so first, it was time to refresh our brand, to go back and think through the intention. But really what we saw about 4 years ago is something that Joey says often is inclusion isn't by intention, it's by design. And while inclusion was at the core of the organization and our core values, it became really clear that we needed to make sure that was intentionally designed into all of our internal and all of what we do externally as an organization as well. And so this journey really started for several years, just examining everything inside of the organization until we've now come to a point where we feel as though we're ready to share that with the world and bring that to the community here today. But we also recognize that it's a journey, and we're always right at the beginning or right at the middle of it, because every, as Kim says, imperfect step that we take forward, we identify new ways that things break and new things that we need to take on and just continue to get better at.
Awesome. I love that, Alaina. And being with the team for 2 years now, I've seen the transition, and this feels so new. This feels so good. And we are just really excited about it. Joey, what does it mean, in your opinion, to build an advocate brand?
Well, I think building an advocate brand is something that is really interesting. It's been a really interesting journey. A lot of companies talk about corporate social responsibility and what they're doing for people and planet. And at the end of the day, for me, being an advocate brand is about putting people first. It's about putting people at the heart of your corporate social responsibility, your team plan, your products, your community, it's about thinking about the people you serve and making sure that you elevate those needs first. Today, I think we have a responsibility as leaders and organizations to recognize that our movements can be a platform for change. Our brands can be a platform for change. There's so much happening in the world when you look around in our industry and beyond that require systemic change to create real inclusion and real equitable spaces where people can be heard and do the amazing work that tech can do. But you only get there if you design it, if you're intentional about it, and you really raise that brand or movement as a platform for change. And so for me, that's what that building an advocate brand is all about. It's recognizing that responsibility and recognizing that opportunity and then doing the right thing.
I love that, Joey. And you said something so key about people first, and that sits near and dear to our hearts. I want to piggyback off of that and go to Candice and ask, what role do brands play in shaping the world? Why is it important to use our platform to drive change?
Sure. When I first joined the Women Who Code board, I was at another brand. I was at Pinterest. And at that point, I was doing a lot of work to make sure that the platform itself and the way that people created ideas about how they wanted to live or what they wanted to cook for dinner that night or what they wanted to wear, et cetera, felt representative, meaning that people could see themselves in the images that they were saving to their vision boards to plan, right? And essentially, and from a brand impact strategy, that became really important because the largest users at the time were millennial women around the world. And, an incredibly diverse set of users. And so they needed to envision themselves, right? And so that was, it felt like a very important platform, not just within the company, which was, pre-IPO at the time and growing and, especially shifting globally. So what it meant to see yourself was very different in a global context, but we knew it was diverse. But also for the tech industry, because it was one of the first brands to create a, head of diversity role and to create very public hiring goals for what the company wanted to see. So I think that part of the importance is moving beyond the entity itself or the organization itself and thinking about how the entity can influence other entities. And now I've spent the last 2.5 years at Google Ventures, and I'm the first person to have a full-time partner role focused on equity, diversity, inclusion. And actually part of that is then also thinking about how the venture space views its relationships to equitable access to funding and equitable access and on-roads into venture, which is a pretty insular industry. So that's how I think about it. It's thinking about your product or your service, their core service you're delivering, and embedding, advocacy into that, and then also thinking about your impact on others.
That's so good. And mentioning the impact piece is like this work impacts so much. So Kim, how do you identify areas where your brand can impact? Which issues to speak out on?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think in the journey that, we've been on at Women Who Code, it's always asking ourselves, like, for most brands, I think now we're all at a crossroads. Where does the brand fall in people's lives, right? Because yes, we have different things that we're doing and trying to accomplish across many brands, any of the brands that we intersect with every single day. But for each of us, it's like, how do we, what role do we play in people's lives, and how can we be a force for good? How can we still meet our mission, vision, and values? And I think even when we're thinking about what Alaina was talking about earlier and how we've shifted, just understanding that brands have a bigger role to play than simply selling the one thing or making that one product or delivering that one service. And so, for me, it's when you're asking yourself that, you're really trying to understand same ideas, the people, like who do you serve? And the who do you serve piece is not just the people you're selling or you're providing service to, but it's the people internal, right? Who are living, breathing, operating, doing, who are truly the face of your brand. So who do you serve starts internal, and then you go external, right? Why are you doing it? What legacy do you want to leave? I think all those things are the things that to, and you bring all of those things together and really get aligned with what your mission, vision, and values are, and make sure the work that you're doing like holds true to it. Are you going to always do it right? No. Are you going to make mistakes? Absolutely. Are you going to be held accountable by the people who you serve internally and externally? As yes, you should be, but then you still take those actions and you still understand what it is, who you serve, why you're doing, what legacy you want, and align it to your mission, vision, and values, so that you can continue to do the work that's necessary to create. For us, right? We want Women Who Code to be here beyond our lifetime, and that's our goal. Right. And so to do that, we have to think that big and know that we're a part of this journey of a larger movement beyond, what we can even see today. So that's, to me, how, you really identify and understanding really the core pieces.
Yes. And it is bigger than us. It is beyond us. So thinking about that, Alaina, as we look to the future, which topics and themes will be more important for tech or society in general? You're on mute.
I was on mute. Before I jump to that, Joey, I saw you came off of mute. Did you have something to add to what Kim said?
Oh, I got really excited when you said, Kim, to do the work internal first. I just wanted to amplify that because, when you came to Women Who Code, that's something that you really worked with us on. And that was such an important part of our journey. And I wanted to say thank you. And also, it just amplified that piece. If you're kind of listening to this discussion and you're wondering where to start, and to share a little bit about the Women Who Code journey, our community was very clear about what they expected from Women Who Code and expected us to raise our advocate voice. And I don't think there was anyone on the team who didn't personally want to do that. And when we started this journey, that was the big question: where do we start? And Kim, that was one of the first things you said to us: start internal. And doing that work lays the foundation in a way that makes the external work somehow possible. And so I just wanted to put a big exclamation point on that and say thank you for everything you brought to Women Who Code, and to share that with anyone who might be wondering where to start.
Love that. Definitely. Alaina, we'll jump it back to you.
Yeah. So you had asked what topics or themes will be important in the future?
In reference to tech? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, we need to have an inclusion part of every new technology, every new era of evolution in the tech industry. We need to be thinking about inclusion and designing for that, from the beginning, because we need diverse voices developing Web3. We need diverse voices developing all of the products, and whether it's physical or digital products that we're using in the future. I'd love to let others chime in if there's something in particular that they're excited about.
Well, I think one thing I would add, and this maybe is not a specific technology, because my goodness, I mean, the impact of technology on traditional industries, from ed tech, right, to in education, to women's health and reproductive health in general, to mental wellness. There are just so many possibilities. GVR portfolio is pretty sector agnostic. It's very broad, but we're investing across consumer tech, where we're looking at, NFTs and, Yuga Labs, for example, and then, all the way over to, our life sciences and biotechnologies, focusing on, both, chronic disease, and other forms of illness. So the ability of technology as a layer onto diagnoses and understanding is just boundless. It's incredible. The way we spend money, the way that we learn, especially the types of things that we've seen over the pandemic. But I think that one analogy I heard recently, last week, I had hosted a lunch with several leaders who are focused on advocacy, and one was Sofia Hernandez, who's at TikTok. She's the head of global marketing at TikTok, business marketing, and she made this analogy. She said, the CEO used to have to be the CRO, right? Focusing on how the business is going to scale from a revenue perspective. And the function has been built out. The CEO became the CTO, right? What is the technology that is that you're building here? And that's, of course, you bring in your experts and your chief architects and so forth. But what I see for the future of work is the CEO's role is as partly the CPO. Like, you have your chief people officer, obviously, but the way that the expectations and the understanding of how we work in a hybrid situation, how we determine at work how we're going to discuss the broader world, the macro environment, the things that we're reading in the news every day, right? How that is discussed and guided from a leadership perspective. All of these things that we're gonna, remote work, et cetera, that we're gonna continue to see. Leadership, that is now integral to leadership. It's not a blip, it's not a wave, it's not like, hey, during this time people are asking for more. It is the future of how you build an organization that is decentralized and has but is bound by culture. And so that is really fascinating to me in terms of where I see the future, and even technology to support leaders in this journey of understanding the multi-generational workforce.
Yeah, if I can jump in too, I feel like that's so right. I think a lot of the pushback now when we're thinking about, designing for inclusion, this is the time when it actually becomes real, because we are distributed, because, what used to be, made ways to create structure, to create culture, aren't really the same, right? And so you do have an obligation to actually say, well, how does my team operate? What makes them the most successful? What allows for us to then do more things for the people that we're serving? And I think, COVID is still a thing, and it's still been impacting us for so much in so many ways. The one thing it did, though, is it forced a lot of organizations to ask themselves, including us, what's the culture that you're building? And you can't create it simply in a building, right? You actually has to be as like an intertwined part of that. And now that you're saying that, Candice, because I think you're right, and it's where it's going. I think this is the time, and we see a lot of pushback from, like with Samaria, things that you've been talking, Great Resignation, and that is all because there's been a lot of a need for actually saying, what does inclusion look like? How do you design a place of belonging? How do you actually not just say it, but do it, and make it sustainable and long term, and not just one day I say it and the next day I'm back to my same old practices. So totally resonates with me what you said, Candice.
Yeah, it's so great to hear all of you say that, because something that I've seen recently and heard recently is that our CEOs are our keeper of culture. And that's exactly what Candice and Kim, you're saying, is that our CEOs have to play a big part in that. And we know that Alaina has done that for us. And I saw Joey, you come off mute. What were you going to add into this conversation as well?
Yeah, I get really excited talking about future and possibility. So I was really excited to hear everybody's thoughts about that. One thing that I always come back to is that tech shapes the products that shape our world. And Candice, you did a great job of just describing how a tech product like Pinterest shapes people's everyday life. And so having diverse perspectives and people in positions of decision-making in the tech industry is critical to make sure that problems get solved that are relevant to everyone's community, right? To different communities. And a lot of things today, isn't being reached with that problem solving power of tech. And so what I hope for the future as we continue to create intentional and inclusive and equity centered spaces is that we see those problems rising to the surface to get solved when you're sitting at that decision making table and deciding which ones are addressed. I also think something that I've noticed is really interesting outside of Women Who Code. I often intersect with folks who work across different STEM fields, and one thing that I always find fascinating is that tech moves really fast, much faster, decades faster in some instances than some of the other science fields that are also shaping our people and planet and world experience. And so I think there's a huge potential for tech to lead the way in ways that academia and other science fields just can't do. That's something that's really unique. So if you sit on an engineering team and you're comfortable with agile development, you're comfortable with the idea of building an MVP and putting it out to market and testing it in responsible ways, that's something that's very unique to our industry and really far outside of the comfort zone for most businesses who are not tech organizations, even some that are tech organizations. And so I think there's a lot that the world can learn from tech, and there are a lot of opportunities to really make impactful and lastful change if we can get that cross-sector collaboration right, and we can keep driving diversity, equity, and inclusion as key themes for making sure the right people are in the room.
So I have a question for the entire panel, and anyone can jump in here. Being that our audience who is listening today, a lot of them are working to get to that next step in their careers. What can they do from exactly where they're seated, where they're seated in their companies? What can they do to make an impact in the inclusion space, in how our organizations are impacted in our shaping? I'll throw it to Alaina.
I'll jump in. So if you are actually interviewing with companies, interview them for their inclusion commitment and their inclusion practices. Let them know that this is important to you, because companies spend a lot of and highly value what top talent is interested in and cares about. And so and I'm assuming since you're here, it is something that's important to you. When you care about it, interview companies for that and let them know that it is important.
Yeah, I completely concur. And I spent a lot of time listening to candidates. I think, one thing that companies would do well to implement more of is listening, though, and especially listening to not only incoming candidates who are a very captive, audience, right, for feedback, but particularly, more, earlier career employees, new employees, who can provide innovation for what's been happening over time. I've been very interested, and this maybe goes back a little bit to the last question around how tech designed around accessibility has really enabled the way that people communicate to be to completely revolutionize it. I mean, I just was on a flight, actually not very long ago. I was on a flight, and when I wanted to listen to something, I wanted to watch something, I didn't want to turn the volume up. I was able to read the captions, and the widespread availability of captions and translations and communication. It's just amazing. And I think one thing to do if you're sitting in your organization is figuring out where some of those things might be broken, or where there are more opportunities to fix accessibility or the experiences for others. I mean, a really basic thing I remember at my last company, there was someone who noticed, if they wore a dress, they couldn't use the little clip-ons for their ID, and so they were like, "Can we have some lanyards, please?" It was very basic, right? But just that little implementation made a difference. The policies of checking for badges, making sure that wasn't something that was discriminatory, where some people are constantly being stopped for, "Do you work here?" etc., and changing policies around how that's enforced. seen that across a number of tech companies. That comes from some people speaking up about how things are working. And then in the technology itself, I remember, again, someone noting something in my previous company's algorithms that was linking, a certain type of background to some of the results. And they were like, why is this happening? And, a lot of people, on the engineering product team got on it and were able to fix it. And then in investing, the way that we in investing committee make decisions are, we hear the founder, they come in, they make their pitch. And then afterwards we deliberate and decide, kind of, and vote really in many ways on whether we make that investment. Well, obviously the people who are introverts in the room or the people that, positional power can have a huge impact on how those decisions are made. So someone changed the entire process. And now we spend the first 10 minutes just typing out what we think, right? And so that's really changed, being influenced by other people. So all these little tiny examples of processes that anyone across the organization can ideally bring forward in a healthy organization, or it can be pretty revolutionary.
Yeah, I think I jumping in there. I agree. I think it's hard, right? I think we all, when we're growing in our career, it could feel fearful. I know growing in my career, when I first came out of law school, it was quite fearful to speak up and say things when you saw things happening that weren't right, or that didn't, that felt like, well, this is a place that I can contribute. I think as you continue to grow in your career, but to the extent you can, having the community around you, having the whether it's into your organization, if that exists, or external, right? Like we have here at Women in Code, but speaking up to the things like Candice said, like noting when you realize you have a team member that is a great contributor, but no one knows it. So then you can elevate and amplify as well, right? You can do things like in your current position, or to be that leader in the space that you hold. And it doesn't risk. And so I don't want to sit here and say it comes sometimes, in the right type of organizations like the one that we're growing here at Women Who Code. Yeah, you should be able to speak up. Sometimes that's not that always the case, but I think it's just as we get confident in who we are and the values that we hold the same organizations to them, and we hold them accountable about the things that we expect to see, and then support our colleagues and our peers, whether it's our manager because they're doing something great and they're not being elevated, so you amplify. If it's your peer, you amplify it. Someone that's new, that doesn't know anything, but you can show them the way to help ease their transition, then see how to be able to do that. And I think those are some of the ways that, we can do that in whatever position we hold, but that's not without an understanding that the power dynamics that Candice was just mentioning that sometimes do limit us. But I do think there are always opportunities to the extent that we can find them.
Something I see pretty often that may seem mundane to most of you out there, but the surveys. Surveys are a great way for you to give feedback to your leadership, to your teams. It is a great way for your voice to be heard. It may seem like a time commitment or things of that nature, but put how you really feel in there. If they say that it is anonymous, it's anonymous. Most technology out there has ways of making sure that these things are locked down, that that information is not given out, but put how you feel. Really let them know. It's a place, it's a time for you to give that information. So it may seem minute, it may seem like, oh, it's falling on deaf ears, but it's not. Like, we are really reading those things. So I think in your companies, it is a great way for them to know how their top producers are doing. We value talent. We hear about the great resignation. We hear about people just leaving for, $2 more an hour. How do we get you to stay? Because turnover is super expensive for each of our companies. So we want to make sure that we are taking care of our talent. We are providing an inclusive environment. So surveys is a key way to get your voice across. And that's
Samaria,
a little plug.
Samaria, I'd love to know a little bit more from your perspective, from a people team perspective. We're talking about building an advocate brand and thinking about building people first cultures. How do you really ensure that your culture continues to live that every day, and you think about your people as a resource for your brand and is living your brand every day. How do you build that? How do you think about that from a people perspective?
So the first thing I like to say is your people are your greatest asset. And I know you've probably heard that before, but it's so true. You cannot continue these companies without having your people. So I know internally at Women Who Code, we really live off of the people first mentality. So that is really evaluating the needs. We consistently survey our teams. We are talking to them, having one-on-ones. It is a culture of being intentional. So I think intentionality is the biggest piece of building a people first culture, and really continuing to take pulse checks and making sure that your team is okay, making sure that your people are okay. And then I really believe that it's a ownership within hiring the right people. So knowing that you're hiring the right people and investing in those people taking care of themselves. So you have to take care of you first before you can take care of an organization. So knowing that we are humans outside of our daily work, that we do have personal lives. So all of that comes into play, especially looking at benefits, total rewards. That's a piece of, building that inclusive, that people first culture. So all of those things go into play. So when you're interviewing and you're talking to your potential employers, you are asking about those things. You're asking about total rewards. You're asking about the culture, because all of that plays into what your employee experience will be. So I do think it is a total thing, and I think we have to continue to check in with our people and continuously be there for them and let them know that they are first, and you as a human is first before anything else. So that's how I would look at building a people first organization. But throwing it back to you all, because you built this. This is before I even came onto the team, there was a thought of what this people first would look like. So what were the steps to getting there, and how can other organizations duplicate that?
I can start a little bit there. I think, as like Joey was saying, it's really starting internal, right? Like asking yourself, well, first, every organization has a mission, vision, and values, right? The question is, does that mission, vision, and values actually show up in the internally in your organization? And I think that's for everyone listening, like go find your organization's mission, vision, and values and ask yourself, well, do I feel this in my day-to-day? Those are opportunities to push back on leadership and say, hey, this is what we stand for externally. Shouldn't we also stand for that internally? And I think for us, it's starting there, right? Looking at our mission, vision, and values, and asking ourselves, where are there opportunities for improvement? Where are there opportunities to grow? What's the next iteration of that? As you see what Alaina announced today, what it is for Women Who Code, right? But starting internal really means taking a really good look about how we operate, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then starting to make the shifts necessary. Candice made a great mention of everything, listening, right? You can't make changes if you don't listen, right? Like the same thing when we were thinking about, changing the branding, the visual elements of Women Who Code. If for those who were with us over this journey, you remember we announced it, we mentioned it, we asked your input, right? It's that same idea. I think it's when we're building and we're trying to do this work, we can see it easily when we're doing external work, but somehow we don't want to apply the same experimenter, scientist model to doing what is necessary to create the actual environment, the culture, the feeling of belonging that we want. So if we take that same mind, we've learned to get here, and then apply it back, and we know what our boundaries are, our guidelines are, mission, vision, values, right? Then start doing the work and examining and asking questions and getting feedback and making adjustments, and then continue to take more action. When you misstep, you learn, continue to move forward, right? And do that type of work. So for me, that's where it starts with. And then it's building upon that and asking, well, where do we want to go? What's the legacy that we want to create? What type of organization do we want to be? And that's, the direction I know as an organization that we took as we started and continue to take every single day. to make sure that we live and breathe the mission, vision, values of Women Who Code to our team and to our community.
I would add on to that, if your organization is thinking about building an advocate brand or just increasing its commitment to inclusion, equity, and diversity, I would say number one, it starts at the top and it has to be resourced. I often will get a message from somebody that says, hey, I just got asked to start an inclusion committee, or hey, I just got asked to, form this business resource group, and where do I start? What change can I really make? And I said, you need to ask a few really important questions. Why did you choose me? Why now? Who's behind this? What are our goals? How's it going to be resourced? And if you really want to make change, there are so many layers that you have to peel back. And it's everything from your people and HR policies, to examining how product decisions are made, to what the experience is in the office every day, to how you go to market. It's really thinking about every facet of the business. It takes time and it takes resources. And so I would say those are the things that I would make sure that you have in place, and make sure there's a serious commitment from leadership, because it's not something that will just happen overnight. And it's something that can't just be checked off and done. It's something that has to be practiced every single day by every leader, every person in the organization, for real lasting impact to happen.
I just wanted to, yeah, I know this is about, clearly, Women Who Code living and breathing this people first organization. It's just been so impressive to see over the past 5 years and beyond. And it's not something it's not something you see everywhere. Just putting it that way. I think another example of a people first organization is just this week. The last week, 2 weeks we've had, just demonstrating the humanity of what people are bringing into work. I coach a lot of companies in our portfolio on this. I mean, there used to be such a firm, bright line between, your personal life and what might be going on in the world and what you do at work. But the fact is that's not actually how we're built as humans at all. And so, coming back to work after Buffalo and Irvine, and the violence and the hate-filled violence that we saw, it's important for leaders to, in a people first organization, to say, I know that I acknowledge what is happening here, and I don't expect you to be 110%, today necessarily, right? Just to put that out there. Or, yesterday coming back after Texas, it's things like that go back to that point that I'm sharing earlier about everyone, in that, on the leadership team, having that, chief people officer lens, as on a shoulder here, because that's important too, just acknowledging humanity.
That's so key, and it's so important to the culture itself, because again, we are people first, we are humans first, and we have emotions, we have feelings, and we know that we can't always just operate as business as usual. And we say that's very important for us to continue on looking even deeper into that. Oh, Alaina, I saw you come off mute. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to kind of echo that. From a leadership perspective, it's been particularly hard, because even though there's been a few moments that have been harder, we haven't been business as usual for years now, and so we're having to learn to navigate and to support our team and ourselves through new and incredible changes that are collectively being felt at a global level. And it I was talking with Joey this week, and my wish did not come true, that we could start seeing things getting just a little bit easier. But the truth is, it isn't, and we have to learn to adapt and continue to keep people at the center and continue to support our team and then more broadly our community through each new challenge. And so I think especially with elevating our advocacy voice and being an organization that's supporting members in 147 countries, it's really important for us to understand what that means and how to activate and how to support one another, and then also just how to stay centered and support yourself, and how to take that step back when you need a bit of a breather as well.
I agree. And that also speaks to the resourcing piece. I can't say that enough, because I know, Kim, you and I've talked a lot about, we're no longer planning our operations to be at 100%. We're planning for people to be operating at 70% or less, because you always need a backup. If you want to be able to give people space, then that work has to be covered, or you have to be able to reprioritize things. So as an organization, you have to be willing to over-resource compared to what you might have been doing a decade ago. But that's really the right resource. It means that your team is not so stretched that they can't step away. And so I know on the teams that I lead, I always think about making sure that we have at least one backup, maybe two backups, because you just never know when somebody's going to need to take a space away. And there's some great conversation in the chat. And some questions that came up. So I just want to acknowledge them. Some folks were asking, how do you find out if companies' DEI reports and things like that? And so I just wanted to throw out a couple of practical pro tips. And I'm sure this panel has a lot of really good advice. When I'm evaluating a company, I do a couple of really simple cursory things. So one, look at their about page. Look them up on LinkedIn. Who do you see working at their organization? What are those people talking about? What are they posting about? What issues matter to them? See if you can get to know their team virtually. And oftentimes you can learn a lot about an organization in a few minutes by just seeing who's in the organization, because after all, organizations are just groups of people. And so you have to see what they're committed to. And so that's one piece of advice. Of course, a lot of organizations will publish annual reports or corporate social responsibility reports, but I also like to look at external metrics for how those organizations are being rated by organizations like the HRC and other groups that are external groups who are looking at organizations, especially if you're looking at big public companies. I'm sure the panel can offer some more observations as well, but those are just a couple of practical pro tips I would throw out.
Yeah, and it's timely right now. It's D&I report season. So spring is when a ton of reports come out. And it used to be, I would say 2016 to 2019, like every time a report came out, there was several articles on, where those companies were. Google's report just came out recently, and you would generally see a lot of the data reported. It's as the news cycle has been, who even knows? We haven't seen as much aggregate report outs where they compare a number of companies and their reports year on year. So to find the most up-to-date data, you usually do have to kind of search for the company's latest release. And a lot of companies will have a diversity inclusion section on their website, but many don't. So you should, make sure to search a little more deeply. For some of the latest, sometimes they have their EEOC report attached, so you can look at some of the government data that is required and collected. Just understanding how the leveling and things like that work in that context. Some of that is a little trickier, but the information really is out there. And then one website I really like is called the Leaky Tech Pipeline. It's from the Kapor Center, and it has some really great industry stats and data that they update.
If you're looking at company reports, here's one that you might not think about. Look at their financial statements. 1099s I've completely blanked on what form we file every year. Alaina, I'm sure you know. 990. Thank you. Look at financial reports to see what companies are investing in, and read the footnotes on those public documents, because they'll tell a story and when you see what companies are investing in, it also gives a picture alongside all of those reports that Candice mentioned, which I have a background in accounting from early in my career. So I always find those to be really telling if you look at the details.
All great points. This conversation has been amazing. It looks like we are at time, but I want to give the panel a chance to leave any last words that anyone wants to say in reference to what we've talked about here. Anyone can jump in. Go ahead, Candice.
I'm gonna stop in like 5 seconds, but I think that one thing to note, when I'm advising our companies, is that the culture is going to evolve anyway. Like, people are going to be talking about the culture. They're going to have an experience of your organization, and it's going to evolve as is. And especially when I work with companies where we have a new CEO who comes in, and they have to understand what the culture was, but then they also have to bring the lens of what they want it to be. Kim talked about legacy, and I thought that was such a great word, because anytime that I start a kind of a mission scoping conversation around inclusion and diversity for a company, is it that you want to enable equitable access to whatever your product or service is? Do you want to eliminate disparities, right? Those are kinds of questions that you can use to shape your mission and values, and then hold the culture accountable, which is usually where a lot of us, even if we don't mean to, fall down. But I just wanted to make that point that early companies and CEOs that are thinking about culture early on and being very intentional about shaping it usually have amazing cultures and great retention.
Yeah, I'll say, I say this a lot probably, but, inclusion, being people first, these are active, living, breathing things. Like, it doesn't just stop and come and stop and go. And so, as we all grow in our careers, as we all grow outside of our careers, right? Because inclusion also doesn't just happen at work. It happens outside in every single thing that we do. It's just work is one aspect of the things that we do. It's just to know that, to take imperfect action, to know that that the organizations you work with, they might want to do the work, but they don't know how, and they need to start somewhere. And so sometimes it does require someone to step up, and I know that's hard. I get that 100%. But sometimes there are organizations that want to, and they're stuck. Now, if they're not resourced, another question, another thing. But, to continue to take imperfect action, and to understand that, this is a journey. This isn't just a one and done. It is a long time, ongoing, continually iterative journey.
Okay. Go ahead, Alaina.
Oh, I'll just say, you belong, and as a community, we are powerful. So use your voice.
Yes. Thank you all. I really appreciate you all being here with us today. This was amazing. We are inclusion at the core. We are designing for inclusion. So we genuinely appreciate you all being on this journey with us. We cannot do it without all of you. So I am just very honored to be on a panel with all of you. So thank you for your time today, and we will wrap it up.